Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with one co-host this week.
I'm Joe Lalo.
All right, and Jeff is on a cruise, so for some reason he didn't want to try to chat with us from the from the excellent internet that cruise ships always have. And we don't have a guest again this week, so 2 weeks in a row it's just going to be us talking about stuff. Hopefully we will not be too boring. We may kind of zip through things in a little less than an hour. I always say that and we never do, but it could happen tonight. But we've picked a couple subjects to talk about that have been kind of things other people have asked about. Like a couple people in the last 2 weeks have asked, have I ever done any selling direct from my website? And we should get a guest on who's great at that. And I looked around in the community and asked on K boards, and everybody's like, oh, I tried that once and it sucked, or, so I actually tried it once and it worked well. So we'll talk about that. And Joe's got some experience too. And then we'll kind of finish up with just kind of going through a checklist of maybe things you can look at if your book just isn't selling as well as you expected it to do. But before we jump into those topics, Joe, do you have any new news since last week?
Sure. Oddly enough, I have technically two pieces of new news since last week. The first one is I struck Tophus, the now legendary Pizza Dragon book. I have removed from Kindle Unlimited. I decided not to re-up it like 3 weeks into the run, but it officially came out today. So as we speak, it is going through the meat grinder and whatnot, and will be showing up everywhere. Basically, I took it out because I looked at the launch that it had, and the launch was not spectacular, but I don't normally organize myself to have big launches. And it wasn't, it did well enough to make back its money within the first couple of weeks, which was all I really needed from it. And the being in KU didn't seem like it was making it perform any better than any other places. I didn't really expect it to. It's YA and it's very niche, so people who are looking for bargain books in quantity probably aren't searching it out. So I would have to really work to get sales for it. And if I'm going to really have to work to get sales for it, I might as well access my entire audience, because I'm not going to kid myself. A book this niche probably only applies to not only just my own audience, but the audience of mine that reads young adult books or has children of the appropriate age for young adult books. So in order for it to be a moneymaker, I can't really afford to limit myself to a single storefront. So I officially took it off. Just literally, I still technically have some page reads for today. That's how recently it came off KU.
Okay, so let me ask before you do your second news. This was your first book in KU. Was there any... would you do it again? Do you think that, I also found YA, my spinoff from my Fallen Empire series. I did 3 books earlier this year, and they were more YA. The heroine was 18, and they definitely had a immature young adult vibe. And I found it too. I was kind of selling to my existing fans rather than drawing in new readers. Do you feel that yours is just too niche, or do you think maybe YA is not doing that well overall for Kindle Unlimited?
I'm not going to pin this on YA specifically. I think it's more to do with the book, not having a premise that's necessarily going to grab the casual reader. I think probably you can still do well in YA, but this is my only experience with it, except if you consider that a lot of people who have left reviews of my other books that refer to them as YA, because I guess they don't have any adult situations. So I'm sure that YA can do fine. But this is a really niche, weird subject, and I wouldn't have expected it to be a blockbuster anyway.
It does seem like YA in some like fantasy and sci-fi categories can do really well. I feel like the epic fantasy stuff does pretty well. The urban fantasy.
Yeah.
I know when I released mine, I went and looked in sci-fi YA, and there was like no space opera. I'm like, oh no, this is probably a sign. They're just that niche for whatever reason. It's not maybe appealing to that audience. It's weird because trad publishing kind of kills it in YA. Some of the books have really taken off, and of course all the adults read them too. But I feel like I know fewer indie authors that are really doing well. I know like Bella Forrest does YA, but she's a little does some YA. It's kind of a special case. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to try to find some YA spec fic people out there that are doing really well and pump them for their secrets.
Yeah, that's the reason we have this show. The other piece of news, kind of short, I technically mentioned it last week, but I got the cover art for Book of Deacon 5, which will be called The Crescents. And so that will probably be up for pre-order by Friday, if not sooner.
All right, very cool. And it will not be in Kindle Unlimited, I
Nope,
assume.
this will be wide. We briefly before we went on, I was talking about how there is a sort of a division point in the story, and I have a book ready for after that division point. I'm considering maybe putting together a KU launch for the sort of distant spinoff of this series. So we'll see, but that's probably probably more than a year in the future at this point.
All right, cool. Well, my news is pretty much the same as last week. I'm working on a new trilogy in my Dragon Blood world. I got the first book off to my beta readers, and they already read it, and I'm powering through the second one here before a conference that's coming up. And for this, it had been a while since I did like 10,000 words a day, which I can do when I'm motivated to do. And I have been doing that for this because I have a date with my editor. I'm going to try to get her the first two, and I have a couple weeks of conferences coming up. So I was like, okay, I can make this work. And it is interesting when I actually buckle down and do it. I can do it in about 5 hours, and I get up every hour and throw some laundry and walk around a little bit and make a latte, that kind of thing. So I'm probably working about 45, 50 minutes of each hour and do like 2,000 words in that and take a break. And it's amazing how you can waste an entire day also and, and not get the words done. So
Yeah, I'm pretty much a master of that myself.
it's interesting how whatever a goal I set for myself, I try to make it. It helps if there's a deadline, even if it's a deadline that I set, or it kind of helps that my editor's gotten pretty popular. So I have these slots booked way in advance with her, and I gotta make those dates, or I'll have to wait till the next month. But I am also mulling over possibly putting this into Kindle Unlimited, which would be hard. I've never done any of my fantasy in KU. I'm not sure if it would do great or not. I think dragons could do well, epic fantasy there. But I mentioned on my Facebook page to my readers, that haven't gotten a new book from me in 6 months. I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to do a new Dragon Blood series. And then two people were like, okay, awesome. It's not going to be in stupid Amazon only, is it? I was like, whoa. So we'll talk a little bit about it today when we're talking about doing not pre-orders, but selling from your site. I'm contemplating maybe doing something where I put the books up on my site for a week in EPUB, Mobi, PDF, whatever people want, and send that out to my newsletter. So if they want to grab it that way, they can. In order to make that happen, I'm pretty much going to try to have the whole trilogy ready to go at once. We'll see. It's kind of ambitious. So I can just because I don't want to dink around with 99-cent sales or even $3.99. If I do it, I'll be like, here it is, $10. Here's the trilogy. And so we'll see. I'll let you guys know in the future if I actually went through and did that. Because this series, this Dragon Blood series, it's always been wide, and I do have, I've done some BookBubs, and I've got a lot of readers for it on Barnes and Noble, Apple, and Kobo. So it would be difficult, even though this is a spin-off set 3 years later with a couple new characters. It would be difficult to to just stick it into Amazon and not anywhere else, especially if it did well. Like if it doesn't do well, it's easy to take it off after a quarter, you know. But if it, like when my Fallen Empire series, I was originally going to do 90 days, and it was still doing really well after 90 days. So I ended up, it was a year before I took it out wide. And so that's rough if you have fans that really want it and are not going to buy from Amazon for, their reasons they don't want to. So it's something to consider. Joe, do you want to ask these questions? And
Sure. We
questions?
it's again, we discussed this beforehand too. It's a cruel irony that on the episodes when we're most able to answer questions from the chat, we're least able to read questions from the chat because we're the only ones talking. But I caught two questions so far. Jin Holland says, "Who do you use for distribution when you go wide? Is it Drafted Digital? And if so, do you hit all the stores?" And for me, I use Smashwords for everywhere but Google, and I go straight to Google. I was one of the people who was lucky enough to be the to be a direct author for Google while they were open, taking applications for that.
All right, and for myself, I go direct everywhere I can. So Apple, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, Google Play. I started out with Smashwords back in 2011, 10, whenever I started. And so I've still got an account there and I still put the new books up there. Um, I pretty much they just so I still make money from them because I have not taken down all my old stuff that I use them for before the other places like Kobo. I think it was maybe 2012 or so before they got their direct thing. And Apple, I think they've had it for a while, but it was a while before I finally figured it out because everybody kept saying how much of a pain it was and that you had to download. I remember I had something going on. It was more than just downloading the program and using it. I had trouble getting bank account set up and all that stuff that things were not registering. But now everything's working pretty smoothly, so I just go direct. And Draft Digital, those guys are great. If you want to use them, if you're not in the country that allows you to upload direct, like Barnes and Noble, I think is still like that for outside of the US. Or if you just want to make it easy on yourself, there's nothing wrong with just letting them handle it all. I think on Kobo there's promos and stuff you can only do if you're with Kobo Writing Life. But a lot of times these guys too can get you into promos. I know we've had Dan from Drafted Digital on the show before, and Mark Coker from Smashwords too. If you're selling decently and you have really good looking books, you might try emailing them and maybe they can get you into some stuff. So there's really nothing wrong with doing it either way. You can save yourself just a little bit of money by going direct because obviously if you do the distribution route, they're gonna take out their. I don't even know. Do you know what it is, Joe? Like 5% or something?
I don't even remember. I
It's
have
not
not
a
looked at
huge
those.
amount.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. It's not bad.
All right. Do you want to ask Neil's question or shall
Sure.
I?
Neil asks, do you think that your fantasy sci-fi genres are more or less applicable to Kindle Unlimited? And I'm going to say that Kindle Unlimited is a good match for fantasy and sci-fi, particularly if they're, very mainstream. I think anything that has got mainstream appeal is going to have a better foothold in KU than something niche because your KU, I want to say, is more for browsers. As to say, people who are going through and trying to find books as opposed to people who are just tracking down authors.
All right, and I feel kind of in the beginning maybe like romance was more definitely be in KU if you were doing romance, and some of the other genres were maybe 50-50. There were some people, but it's really gotten big. There's a lot of KU subscribers now, and I think if you just look through the top 100 in your genre and just see how many books have that, read in Kindle Unlimited, you'll see that it's probably like 80 out of 100, and I would say most of the sci-fi and fantasy categories. I haven't gone in recently and counted, but I know in the sci-fi romance it's really heavily skewed that way. And I'll take a look at epic fantasy while I'm thinking about my Dragon Blood series here. I suspect there's going to be a lot of dragons and warriors and wizards that are in KU too. And something to think about too is if you write the really long epic fantasy or epic sci-fi, that you're going to be rewarded for that if you're in there and you can get the people borrowing it. You may actually make more from a borrow than from a sale. So I think that probably around, if you're over 100,000 words selling an ebook at $3.99, or maybe like 150, I would say somewhere in there. They always change their monthly payout, but at that point you might be getting more for a borrow. So, and those borrows are easier to get than the sales. We've talked about that before. So I do feel like with the real niche stuff, like Joe's Pizza Oven, that may be where you struggle because you're not really a good solid fit in any of the subgenres. There's no Pizza Oven subgenre yet, but when there is,
When there is, I'm going to have the best long tail ever.
you're going to be that #1 spot for
Darn right.
years. All right, I guess that is our news. So we can move on to talking about selling direct. Do you want to go first, Joe, with just kind of, well, neither of us are experts. We fully admit that. And if we run into somebody that's just killing it and making $1,000 a month or more from their website selling their ebooks, we will get them on the show if we can. But in the meantime, we'll tell you our experiences and what we've heard from others and why most people are not doing it with their fiction.
Yeah, I'll get started with this. I have the ability to sell. I have a storefront on my site, and I do sell direct certain things. Most of it, my experience selling direct off my website is autographed paperbacks. This cabinet down here, up there is all toys and stuff that I had made. Down there is all of I have 10 copies of each of the books that I have in paperback. And I have a spot on my site where people can order an autographed copy. And it hasn't been selling that much recently because I haven't really been directing too much traffic directly to my site recently. Mostly I'm more of a social media thing lately. But in the past, I would sell, enough to make it worthwhile. And I do all my stuff print on demand, hence having 10 copies. And I also have the ability to sell ebooks directly, but in the 4 years that I've had that capability, I believe I have never sold any, except for the one test sale I did at the very beginning to determine that it worked. So the autograph physical copies, a few $100s a year up until recently, and then the ebooks never, ever.
Do you feel like the trips to the post office are worth it? Do you like wait until you have a few that are going to go out, or do you just trot on down there every time you get an order?
Well, it just so happens that part of my daily routine is to take a big long walk, and one direction. If I walk in one direction, I will pass the post office. If I walk in the other direction, I won't. So if if an order came in the previous day, then I walk past the post office. It's not that bad because I take my payments through PayPal, and PayPal has a print shipping label thing. So if you don't want to, you don't have to stand online. It's just you print the thing, stick it on the box, and throw it in the mail. So I find that it's not that big of a hassle. If I was further away from my post office and I was getting lots and lots of orders, then I think it would be problematic because I wouldn't be able to just carry them with me. But at the small volume I was moving in my specific routine and situation, the post office part was not a problem for me.
All right, very cool. And my experience has actually been several years ago now. This is pretty early in my career when I did this. I think it was the fourth book in my Emperor's Edge series ended on a cliffhanger, and I was writing book 5 as fast as I could, but I felt really bad about that cliffhanger. So I said, and people were asking too, like, when is 5 going to be out? When is 5 going to be out? So I put together, I believe what it was an unedited manuscript, like in Word, of 5 for people who just want to see what happens next in the story and they were dying for it. And then I put it up on my site where you could buy that for $10, and then I would also send the complete ebook when it was, all edited and ready to go. I think that's what I did. Like I said, it's been several years now. This was probably 2011. And so I sent it out to my newsletter, which at the time was not that large. Maybe, I would guess I had probably like 1,000 people. I wasn't ever trying to get people on my newsletter. I had a very small sign up form. If you look, in fact, the website's still like that on that site. If you look for it, you might find it. So, but I sent that out and said, like, here, and it ended up being like maybe 3 weeks before the book was going to be available. And I had, I made about $2,300. So, and this was over about a week and a half, and it was very unsophisticated. I basically had, here's the PayPal link, send me $10. I mean, I think I had it filled out. There was like a form or something that PayPal had walked me through putting together. So send me $10 and I'll email you the manuscript and the ebook. So it was very unsophisticated, and I made a little work for myself because I was doing it manually. At the time, I thought, oh, maybe like 40 or 50 people will do this. And like I said, it was more like 230, which is, not huge amounts, but a lot if you're doing it by hand. But I made enough that I was encouraged. I feel like that was a good way, like if I ever do it again, which I may, as we're talking about, doing something on your website that is not just available already on Amazon. Like if they can go there in one click and if the store already has their credit card, it's going to be a lot easier for them. And the book is delivered on their Kindle or whatever they have, iPad, then so you have to have something, either that, you will get a few people randomly that will email you and ask you, what's the best way for me to buy your books so you get the most money? And that's the thing with the selling direct is you can get like 90 or 95%, depending on how much is going to PayPal or whoever you use, and then if you're using any third-party software to automatically deliver the ebook. And maybe I'll note here, Joe was pointing this out too, that BookFunnel now has something where you can integrate it with PayPal and they'll be your delivery system once you receive a payment. So it looks a little complicated. I looked at, just kind of glanced at the code, but I don't know. What do you think, Joe? You're more of a software guy. Would it take just a few minutes to set up?
Uh, it seems like yeah, the setup seemed a little bit complicated, and it's the sort of thing where I dare say it's probably no more complicated than setting up the PayPal account to begin with, but that was, it's the sort of thing you only have to do once. I haven't gone through the process yet because, again, I have that already in my website, but the customer service and the fulfillment, BookFunnel has served me very well for the purposes I've been using it for, so I wouldn't I wouldn't be surprised if I talked to my web guy and in a couple of weeks or months you'd hear me explaining how the BookFunnel thing went.
Yeah, I was curious. That's what's kind of got me interested in this again too, is that not that there haven't been other ways before to have little shopping carts and things on your site, but this is an interesting way to do it. And with BookFunnel, you do have the customer support, which is a big reason why I've never put a real store on my site. Just because if somebody orders a paperback and I'm out of town for 2 weeks, I can't ship it. Or even with an ebook, they might have trouble getting it on their device, which often happens when they're not just doing the typical purchase from Amazon or Kobo or whatever, and it's not automatically appearing on their e-reader. There are, thankfully there are tons and tons of people who read on e-readers who are not tech people, and they maybe don't know how to sideload it or pick it up from just out of their email and put it on their ebook reader. And it's great that they can now get all this stuff automatically, but it's a little harder for us when we're selling it just from our site. But so that was my experience, and like I said, at the time, that was pretty good extra money to make in a week or so. And interestingly, because 230 is like a lot if you're getting $10 per person, and I got most of that. But at the same time, it's not a lot if you're launching on Amazon and in a series that sells pretty well and that sells thousands of copies when you release it. So, because I think that's one of the fears with selling on your site is that you're going to kind of cannibalize your Amazon sales, which even though you're making more on your site, you might be hurting your ranking or your visibility on Amazon by not having as many sales there. I found with that particular experience, it didn't have much of a dent on how many I sold on Amazon too. All right, so those are our experience. We'll just kind of quickly go over the pros and cons for if you're considering it. Pros, like we talked about, is you're going to make more money per ebook. That was a $5 ebook for me, so to make 90%, is better than making 70%. Do you sell yours on your website? Is it basically the same price on Amazon?
Yeah, I sell at the Amazon list price for the paperbacks that I sell, which is a huge, it's like $4 or $5 more profit than if I was to have sold them online. I only make whatever. I price my paperback pretty low, so I only make like $1 off a paperback sale. But when I sell them on my website, I make more like $11 per sale. So paperbacks in particular, especially if you include if you pass the shipping onto the reader, like let them know it's also $5 shipping, you make a tremendous amount more money off of it, and it's got my name written in it.
Yeah, do you just ship to the US then?
Officially, I don't say that I don't ship outside the US. I have shipped 2 or 3 books out of the US. You lose money if you do that without sort of talking to them and saying, hey, listen, you are in the UK, this is going to be a $20 shipment fee. Are you okay with that? But
yeah.
So far that hasn't come up often enough for me to put a little asterisk on the site, I don't think.
That's good because, yeah, I've just kind of stopped shipping overseas. Somebody asked me and I went and got a quote from UPS and it was going to be $100 for 4 books. And like, these books are only worth like 30 bucks. And then even USPS was 60 some. And I was just like, no, I'm not going to ask somebody to pay that much. So I'm now going to send them a Christmas card.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so physical books, definitely good because you can get those author copies for a lot less. Depending on how big your book is, it might only be like $5 and then you sell it for 15 or whatever. Ebooks too, you're making more and it's a digital thing, so obviously it doesn't cost you anything to, it's basically free. But another pro is that you just kind of, another thing that intrigues me about it is you're relying a little less on the other stores. You know, specifically a lot of us that are doing some exclusive stuff with Amazon. You know, I'm still wide with almost everything except the pen name stuff, so I don't feel that quite so much. But for those, you know, there's people that are making really good money in KU and on Amazon, but you're always a little worried, you know, because every month there's somebody like, I got kicked out. And, you know, sometimes they were doing something suspicious. Sometimes they were just targeted by bots or whatever. And even if you get your account back, that's a pretty big freak out right there. to Especially if you're kind of counting on the next two paychecks coming because you've already sold those books, and then they because they can wipe you, you know, they can say no, you know. If they, even if they're in KU and they just happen to find your book pirated and for sale on Apple, which possibly happened to me, if you can't get that book yanked down fast enough, they can wipe out all your reads for that month and say sorry, you know, you're not within our terms of service. So this is just, you know, once you have a mailing list and kind of a reader base build up, it's a way you can have an extra kind of backup plan if you ever need to put something in real quick or something, that because something did happen with Amazon, or, you know, you just never know in the future what's going to happen. Maybe, you know, there's always talk, maybe they'll cut it down to 35% royalty. And at that point, it may become worth the hassle of selling direct on your site and trying to funnel your readers there if you're able to make 95% on your site. Do you have any thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, I feel like this is sort of a spiritual equivalent to, we talk about how it's good to have your mailing list because, you know, social media is great and everything, but social media comes and goes. A mailing list is the one thing that is entirely within your control. This is the one sales platform that is entirely within your control. And if all else fails, if you've got this in place, then you've got, you know, you can't lose everything if you've got this. So I definitely feel like that's one reason to at least consider doing it, and maybe to sort of exercise those muscles just as the contingency plan. So anything that you can have complete control over is attractive to me in terms of book sales and book promotion.
Definitely. And like we said, I think most of us are going to find that that's not super successful just trying to sell the same ebooks there as we're doing on Amazon. If you really want to make it work, maybe do a pre-order, you know, like I was talking about maybe doing for my non-KU people. Was I talking about this on the show or before the show? I don't even remember now.
There was, you know, some talk of it on the show, but I think it was sort of glossed over a bit.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll talk about it in the future if I actually do it. But it it's a way to, if you wanted to put your books in KU, but you still have readers that are wide that want them, to maybe give them a week to buy it on your site in all the formats, and then they can, if they want it, then they can get it, and if they don't want to buy it that way, then they can wait till you take it wide, whenever that may be. But at least you gave people the option, and you can say that you gave them the option, and if they took advantage of it, there's extra money in your pocket too, and it's just something to consider. Of course, you would need to take it down from your site once you click the button to go into KDP Select and be exclusive, so you cannot have it both ways. All right, one other pro to possibly doing it is that you have the ability to get a list of actual buyers, which is, you know, you set up your mailing list, but you don't know that people paid money for your books before getting on your mailing list in most cases. I mean, let's hope they bought them and they're big fans of them, and those are the people that are joining. But it's not quite the same as like, oh, here's $10 that came in from PayPal from Joe Lalo bought one of my books for $10. Excellent. So you get this list of like actual buyers, which is going to be really valuable, and you can put them into a list of people that, a special list of actual buyers, you know, that if you're going to do something official, they're going to have to opt in. You can just set up a different one on Aweber or MailChimp, whoever you have. But it can be good to know, you know, those people they bought once, maybe they'll buy in the future. If you ever do like a Kickstarter or Patreon or something like that, those might be the kind of people that are willing to do more than just borrow your book from KU for their, you know, they kicked you $10. So they're maybe not as price sensitive and are a pretty good fan of yours.
Yeah, it's we talk a lot about like when you're trying to determine the effectiveness of an ad, it's incredibly useful to be able to tell sort of end to end when a purchase was made or anything like that. And this is the, again, sort of the ultimate amount of information available. If data is key to figuring out how to sell books, then this is the most data you're ever going to have.
All right, and a couple of cons. I guess we've already talked about this, that it's not going to be quite as easy with the delivery for most people. Your tech-friendly tech people are going to have no problem grabbing it from BookBub, or not BookBub, but BookFunnel or whoever you use if you automate it. I will say, don't do what I did. Do not just put the pay link up on your site and say, oh, I'll email you the ebook whenever I wake up or whatever. Because if you got somebody in the UK, they may be waiting 10 hours while you're sleeping to get their ebook, which is not the best experience. This is, like I said, more 2011 era. And I would have set it up as a real shopping cart if it had been a permanent thing, but since it was like a very much kind of a whim thing, this is what I did, and I do not recommend doing it that way again. So the delivery isn't going to be as easy, but for a lot of people, I know if you have like the iPad, you just click on the email and open the ebook. So depending on what e-reader people use and if their email is linked to it, it might not be that bad. And BookFunnel does give instructions and help for all the specific e-readers. All right, another con is customer service. Right now, if your book does not show up on somebody's e-reader, they're going to email Amazon most of the time, although not necessarily. I do get emails from people that are like, like, I think Amazon needs to help you with that. Sorry, I have no idea what's going on with them.
Yeah, I've gotten my fair share of emails from people asking how books work, and also I've gotten my fair share of emails asking if I know of any stores that you can buy books with PayPal. So like I've had to do tech support before people even bought my stuff. And by the way, smashwords.com takes PayPal.
All right, good to know. Yeah, I think that's more of for international sales a lot of time. PayPal is kind of the preferred choice for a lot of folks. But that's actually, I feel personally that customer service is a really big deal. Like, you don't want to spend your time doing it. If you're the author, artist, entrepreneur, or introvert type, you don't want to answer tech questions, and especially when you start getting the same things over and over again. So that's why if I were to do it again today, like the BookFunnel deal sounds like a good idea because they're going to handle hopefully most of it. They even give you a little snippet that you can paste at the end of the email that says to direct people to them for questions. So does make it more appealing because, if you're only getting one ebook order a month, probably it's not a big deal. But if you did something like I did where you're going to get a bunch of people in 1 week, you're going to be like pretty busy that week answering emails. So just something to consider that for the most part, we don't have to deal with when we're just doing it through the stores. All right, another con is just that you do have to set it up initially and maintain the store or shopping cart or whatever you're going to use on your site. So maybe not a big deal, just get a web person to do it, but things break. WordPress is always updating if that's what you use in the background. So if something that works today, some code that works today may not work all of a sudden. And it's just a kind of an ongoing thing you'll have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you'd be amazed. Again, my web guy made a custom storefront, and you would be amazed how often I can break it. Like, oh, listen, I have a book title with a dash in it. He's like, I didn't anticipate a dash in your book titles. Now I have to, code to allow that. That was being sanitized out. I'm like, oh, great. So you'd be amazed at how quickly custom stuff can break.
Dashes. What were you thinking? I suppose you've got colons in some of them too.
Yeah, that too.
All right. I feel like it's the ampersand that really messes with a lot of code stuff.
I almost want to I almost want to release a book that's got a closed bracket but no open bracket, just because I know that will break everything.
Except that your Amazon page won't load so that you won't be able to sell any books.
I crashed Amazon with my book title.
All right. And based on our vast experience, we'll just kind of end talking about some of the best practices for doing this. I already kind of covered this. Probably a limited time, kind of a special product in a series that you've got fans for is probably going to do a lot better than simply having the same ebook for sale on your site that's on Amazon. So it's, and for a premium kind of product, you can sell it for more. You can do like the $10 or maybe even a $15 thing for a digital, something that's awesome that's not available in the stores yet. Or, I wouldn't do it for just an ebook, but like when you're kind of combining it with, here's, maybe you do some character interviews, some bonus stuff that you're not planning on just putting out on the regular book on Amazon. Something to make it, or bundling some books together to make it, not only can you get more, but this is gonna be more worth your time if you just got a higher price point all in all. Uh, I don't know. I feel like for $5, it's not worth even having to deal with even whatever mild customer service comes your way. But if you're looking at $10 or $15 per sale, it gets better, especially with a digital product that after you've paid for your editing and all that, it's not costing you anything to distribute more copies of it. All right. Any thoughts on that? Would you try that kind of thing, Joe? A special product that you're just going to sell on your site?
Yeah, I've done special edition type things in the past. I mean, obviously with the autograph book, like that's along the lines of what you're talking about. It's a thing that's not available anywhere else, so it's going to sell better on your site because it's the only place I can get it. I have done special editions of the Book of Deacon. The Book of Deacon originally wasn't available in with chapters. It was written with no chapters. Lots of the Terry Pratchett books have no chapters, and I was sort of patterning after that. And when the book started to pick up steam and I ended up being on Story Bundle, I came out with a Story Bundle edition that was chapterized, and that was eventually the one that became the audiobook and all that. So I have done like that sort of a special edition thing, like rolling in non-plot things, but like structural things. I think there are plenty of people who it turns out are willing to go out of their way to get something more convenient than they feel like your original product was. So I definitely think that adding something, or sort of along the same ways that I add short stories that I had not released elsewhere into my book collections, I feel like throwing in sort of ancillary material or missing scenes that people had asked about is a cool way to make an on-site thing more palatable to people.
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised with how many people were willing to pay a little more just to get the early access to that. To me, getting an unedited manuscript from an author would be like awful. Like it would drive me nuts reading it with all the errors and blah 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 that hasn't been edited yet. But if you're really into a series and you had that cliffhanger ending or something, I guess that's why in that case it worked. And I think I kind of knew that, or I wouldn't have bothered doing it. But yeah. People will pay. I will pay $15 for an e-arc from an author I like if it's a series I like. I've done that. Baen does often has their e-arcs available a couple months before the release, so people will also pay for early access to something. All right. Best practices, like we've been talking about. If you do a limited time thing, you're not stuck with the customer service 365 days a year, right? You can go on vacation for 3 weeks without wondering, oh, what happens if somebody orders a book while I'm gone and I wasn't going to check my email because I'm in Bolivia or wherever. So I'm a fan of that stuff after my experience. And I don't know, Joe, have you had that happen where you're kind of out of the country or something and somebody orders a paperback? You just kind of email and say, well, it'll come soon.
Yeah, I have been not on a cruise. I was out of state. I was visiting my grandparents for a week, and unlike I was on the road on the way up, and I received the notification that a sale had happened, and I sent a message to the person. I was like, I'm gonna have to stick some extra swag in there because this is not going to ship immediately. Uh, they were understanding. I feel like, I mean, if you're doing brisk sale and you're getting lots of orders all the time, that would become problematic. But because I get so few, I typically respond to people directly with an email. And I feel as though if they're a fan enough to buy something from your site, receiving a direct correspondence from the author is enough to sort of offset some of the less business-like methods that are necessary to be doing business directly.
All right. Yeah, and if you were actually selling a lot of physical books, maybe if you were doing like middle grade or something where people often buy the physical books, you could have probably somebody that, here's my ship books. If you need to send it out, I'll pay you $10 or whatever while I'm gone. All right. Last thing to comment on is that For this to be effective, I mean, we've kind of hinted at it here, but it's probably not worth trying to do until you do have a fan base built up. You know, you've got a mailing list, because your mailing list is really the only way you're going to be able to direct people to this. Nobody on Twitter cares if your book is for sale on your site, but your people on your mailing list are excited if they can get an advanced copy or a bonus bundle or something like that. So you need to have a mailing list. And it's probably going to be you want it to be an established series, or something they're going to be excited about, because as we've talked about, it's a little more effort for them to go to your site. And even if they have a PayPal account and they don't have to put in credit card information, it's just a couple more hoops. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but if I am shopping online at 11 p.m. at night in bed with my laptop, and I get to a site and I have to put in my credit card information, and it happens to not be, some of them it's stored in there, but other ones it's just blank. Like, I have abandoned the cart many times. I'm just like, oh no, screw it. I'm not going to get my purse. I'd have to go all the way out to the living room. I'm already in bed, forget it. And I feel I've talked to other people. I'm not the only one who is like this. Some things you buy that are just kind of like on a whim. And if you suddenly have to make an effort, it's just like, oh, I didn't want it that bad after all. So there, just something that is going to make people, even if they have to go to get the credit card the next day, they're going to come back and do it and go ahead and buy it. So, all right, last thing, because somebody asked about this. If you do sell from your website, what do you do about as far as reporting for taxes goes? And I will tell you, I've been selling online various things. I started with beef jerky from Oh Boy Alberto on eBay back in like I don't know, whenever eBay first started. We had a factory outlet, and I used to go there and get all these giant things for like $5 and sell them on eBay. All the years I've been selling on PayPal, I've never gotten a 1099 from them. You have to make, I checked on their website, you have to make $20,000 a year in a year, and also sell more than 200 things in order for them to send you one. So basically, just my answer is you're just going to have to keep all the receipts. And that's another reason why I like just everything at $10 or something like that. So you can just look through briefly count all of the sales you had and be like, okay, I had 193 sales this year, so I made whatever, $1,930. If you're doing physical books, it's more complicated, because you got to keep track of how much you spent to create space for wherever you get your books, and then how much you made, and track the difference. And if your tax person will have different spots on there, or if you do TurboTax, they'll guide you through that. But definitely, it probably should go out without saying, keep the receipts of everything. PayPal makes it nice. They send you an email every time you get a sale, and you can just put it over in a little folder if you want, or print it out every month and do your books, however you do it. Joe, what do you do about that kind of stuff?
What I typically do, again, because I actually was doing a fair amount of this until recently. At the end of the year, I will download my entire history, my entire PayPal history, and the way I have it set up is that there's automatically a note in the purchase that indicates that this was an autographed paperback or whatever. Like, I have the product name in the note, so I can just take the resulting. I think they give it to you as a CSV or whatever, as a Excel file. I would just go through and just filter it so that I get all of those, and then I have all the stuff that all of the money I made, and then I separately have been keeping track of how much I spent on the original stuff and the postage. So yeah, PayPal, like, you can get the information and filter it pretty quickly if you're used to doing data processing, which was my job for 9 years.
All right, that's good to know, and sounds more efficient than me just having my special folder on my inbox.
All right, I've been trying to grab some questions from the audience, and we're going to try to answer some of them quickly before we move on to our second half. First, do you find it easy to go where your audience is so they see your books? And if so, why do you think so? Well, first, I'm going to say that I try to just be everywhere so that no matter where my audience is, they will hopefully see them. But I feel like that's what your mailing list is for, is that's your audience, and you can ideally just tell them the book is out, and that's that. But similarly, you can sort of having their names lets you sort of ask where they want it and how they want it. I don't know that I've ever had a situation where I showed up in like an online community and pitched myself successfully, because I don't think people are terribly receptive to people coming up and shouting buy my book. So mostly I just try to be available everywhere and have the ear of my my mailing list, and hopefully get some word of mouth from the mailing list.
Yeah, with that question, I assume that kind of the best we can do as an indie is we can be in all the digital stores that will sell our ebooks, Kobo, Apple, Amazon, those guys. It's a little hard when your audience still buys physical books and wants to go into their local Barnes and Noble and is kind of like, why isn't your book here? Every now and then I get emails like that. I looked all over for your book. I'm like, I'm sorry, my books are never going to be in your local Barnes and Noble unless I go crazy one day and get something traditionally published. So, but I try to be in all the places, all the main places. I'm not in a lot of the obscure little stores, because I've gotten emails over the years of startups that are like trying to solicit your books, and it's not worth your time at some point if you're going to sell one book of the year to actually take the time to upload your books there. That's how I feel. Some other people believe in just being everywhere possible. And at all the places where I am, Google Play, Kobo, even, I make decent enough money there that it's definitely worth my time to upload my books there. Obviously, if you're just on Amazon, if you're just doing the exclusive thing with them, that's where it is. And you're just going to have to accept that the only audience you're going to grow is people who are Amazon fans. Fortunately, that's a really large amount of people. As we've had some guests on this show before who have pointed out that Amazon is the biggest store by far, and then Kindle Unlimited is kind of like its own little store, and it's larger, with the number of subscribers than any of the other stores. So I just I like to, ideally I would be as many places as I can. I've been doing the Amazon exclusive thing for the last couple series for launches, not indefinitely, because of the perks, because of the increased visibility, but I eventually take my stuff out and put it everywhere.
All right. Next question is from Charles Mellor, just for Lindsay. Lindsay, I saw your Twitter post about the folly of using pen names. What are your thoughts about using a pen name if you are writing mystery and sci-fi?
Oh, see, I actually posted that as something I wasn't entirely sure I agreed with. And, I just like to post interesting articles out there. Now that I've had the experience of writing with a pen name, I would only do it for the reason I did it, quite frankly, is because I had a much higher sex and heat level in the Ruby books than I do in my regular stuff. And a lot of my regular fans weren't comfortable with that, which is absolutely fine, but it just seemed like a good way to warn people, like, probably if you pick up one of my books, there's a little bit, maybe by book 7, the characters finally get to have some romantic times, but it's not going to go on for 10 pages. But then and I think that's good too for people who might do, especially if you go into the more erotica, really detailed stuff, that can really offend a lot of readers who are not looking for it. And you don't want them to be surprised by it if that's not something that they like. So that's kind of what I do it for, and I would do it again for those reasons. I don't think I would bother now, knowing having had the experience of maintaining 2 pen names and trying to continue to have releases coming out with 2 names. It's a lot of work, because you don't have to set up the social media, but you're probably going to have a website. You really need to have a mailing list for each one. So you're doubling your work of maintaining everything. For mystery and sci-fi, I'd probably just go with it, And in that article, they pointed out a lot of authors. I think Neil Gaiman and some other people who mentioned that, here they did this YA and this other, really adult, mature, philosophical stuff, and it's all under the same name. The reason you might want to consider starting a pen name is if you just want to experiment too, and it does look kind of cluttered, I will admit, like on Amazon, if you've got a whole bunch of stuff that's not related to maybe the series you're launching now, and people go to your other things and they don't find more like what they liked, it may be kind of a put off, but I'm not sure I would worry too much about that when I compare that to the effort of just maintaining. And because I will tell you this right now, if you start a pen name and you publish a series and then you don't publish anything more for a couple of years, those sales are you need to keep releasing, and it's a little easier. All those releases are under the same name. All right.
Yeah, I have to agree that the most important and perhaps only really necessary time to do a pen name is when you just don't want, when you literally don't want your audiences to cross over. Like if the audience of your main name will not like or will object to what your pen name is writing. And now I've got a question that's just for me.
All
Um,
right.
Craig asks, question for Joe, since I know Lindsay is too shy for such events, but any tips for having a table at a local convention? I have never had a table at a local convention, but I have gone to a great number of conventions. And here's what I can tell you about having a table. First, if you want to sell books, like if you want to sell things and make money, and you can, I mean, I don't know how much the tables cost. They're in the order of several hundred to several $1,000s, depending on the size of the convention. But again, you know, for a paperback, for example, you're probably making $10 per book that you sell. So realistically, you don't have to sell that many in order to pay for a table. But that being said, you should probably not go to a convention expecting it to be a giant payday unless you have some very enticing products. But let's say that you are trying to sell your books. One secret is to be making eye contact with people as they walk by. It's amazing how quickly people feel obligated to talk to you once you have made eye contact. It's also amazing how many people, like myself, have gotten really good at navigating a convention without making eye contact with anyone. Also, it's a good idea to have a lot of swag at your table. Because the other good thing about a convention is that people are going to learn about you. Maybe they're not going to buy your book there because they don't want to carry it around, but have cards, have you know, postcards, have bookmarks, just so that people can remember you. And also, you know, don't, you got to have sort of thick skin, and 98% of the people are going to walk by the biggest author that's there. So more than 98% of the people are going to walk by you. But conventions are cool, and I bought plenty of stuff at conventions. So, you know, there's ways to do it, and hopefully those are some of them. And now I'm going to ask a question that actually leads into our second half, and that is, how long should you wait until you decide that the book is not selling well?
Before taking it out of KU, or just
Just,
before
just,
killing
uh,
yourself? And no,
just before you
hopefully that was not the
decide that,
question.
you know, before you have passed judgment that this book isn't selling well, and maybe you need to check the things that we can list in this
Oh,
section.
okay, okay. I will say before we move on completely that I actually interviewed somebody that did pretty well at that stuff once, I think, on my other podcast. And two secrets were: have a buddy, because it's easier to, it's just easier if you have
And you don't
another
want to leave your
author
table
buddy.
empty when someone needs to take a potty break.
Apparently not. But I feel like it's easier to strike up a conversation, just be a little more outgoing, even if you're an introvert. Although those, all of us autistic people cringed when you talked about eye contact there. But it's easier with someone else. And also, they said to have chocolates. Or if you were at the Tucson Book Fair, which is out in the sun of Tucson in late spring, candy that won't melt. That can draw people in, and then you talk about your books. So, all right, how long to before you see? What was the question? How long before you give up, or just kind of when do you decide a book isn't selling well?
It is how long do you wait? How long should you wait until you decide your book isn't selling well?
Well, it's interesting because it depends on your expectations to some extent. I've seen people go on keyboards and complain that their book is not, they had a launch and it's really disappointing, you know, maybe in comparison to another launch. And then you go look at their book and it's like 1900 overall in the Amazon store. And you're like, what the heck is wrong with that? But, you know, if you had a book that hit the top 200, 1900 is disappointing. So I guess check your expectations a little bit. Are you a newer author? Are you trying a new genre, new series? You know, my expectations in the beginning, I was really excited. I was trying to sell a book a day, one ebook for $2.99 a day. And at the time, I think that was good enough to get her out of 40,000 overall in the Amazon store. I feel like it's probably more like 100 to 200,000 now at a book a day. But be realistic. And then, you know, if it's at some point though, it is, you want to pull the plug. Like if you got some ads going and it's just they're not working, don't keep throwing money at it if it's not catching on. Like the times where I say most of my launches, I probably spend like 250 on ads for the launch. If I can book a couple things with like e-reader news today, I'll do those, and I'll do Facebook ads the kind of the week of the launch, and out to the newsletter, and that's about it. But then sometimes if I see that it's sticking and it's actually catching, I'll throw some more ad money on it because it's worth it. It's making whatever much amount a day that a lot more than I'd be spending on the ads. So I would probably just, I don't know, don't necessarily give up on it, but I guess that should lead us into our little 8 things, huh? Some
Yep.
things you can check, like if you're what to check if your book isn't selling. And I'm laughing because it's almost been an hour, and I thought this would be a really short show. It never happens, but these shouldn't take too long to go through. Just a little checklist. So number one thing, the cover and the blurb. Don't judge for yourself. Get some of the people on Kboards or in your Facebook author groups who are not afraid to be critical, and ask them what they think. It's very hard to write a blurb by committee, but if enough people tell you like, oh, your grammar's kind of wacky, or one of the things I see in blurbs really often when people are asking for advice, I'll go look at the blurb, and you do not give a crap about the character. Nothing in the blurb makes you care about the character. So make sure you got the stakes in there and like why you should empathize with this character, because I feel like epic fantasy were really bad. We're like all this stuff about how cool the world is and the dragons are returning, or there's some huge evil coming to the land. I think we actually had someone on the show that said for male readers, maybe the plot stuff is a little more appealing, but if you're going for female readers, emphasize the character stuff. Since on Amazon we can't, do 2 different blurbs depending on the sex of the person on the page, we can't do that necessarily, but we can maybe try to work elements of both into your blurb. So there's books on there. Libby Hawker has a really good book on taking off your pants, or maybe that's her outlining book. Blurb it, something about blurbing. And she even has some free videos on her site. I guess I'll try to make a note to link to those, because they're just actually the videos are really good, but you should give her $2.99 for her book too. And do not forget to make people care about your character in your blurb. Do you have thoughts on that, Joe? I mean, we kind of all know covers, like your cover should be awesome. Blurbs I don't know, it's a little harder to tell when it's awesome or not, I think.
Yeah, the nice thing about blurbs, I will say that a bad blurb can really, like the work that is done by a good cover can be undone by a bad blurb, because it's sort of the second thing that people see. And it's you got to have the successful cover blurb combo in order to get a purchase. And I know I've never went back and tweaked my blurbs, but the nice thing about blurbs is that they're sort of, you can hit a formula where it's like the first 2 sentences are, your pedigree as an author, and the next 2 sentences are the introduction to the character, and the next one is the conflict, and the next one is the hook. You can learn blurbs, and once you know it, you can sort of turn the crank and get them at least into a format that people sort of expect. So they're super duper important, but they're learnable, and that's the best I can say about that.
And I'll say I've kind of experimented with both long blurbs and short blurbs. I haven't noticed in particular which works best. I feel like maybe in romance story or any kind of love story where you're going to have like the male POV and the female POV, and then the joint thing they have to do together paragraph, that's pretty formulaic for romance. So these may tend to be a little longer. I've also done quite short blurbs, like usually after writing a real long one and realizing it's too convoluted, I'm like, the first paragraph is actually, I think that could sell the book by itself. And, there's been times. I worry about it less when I'm deeper in a series. I, of course, still try to put together a good one, but book one where you're really hoping to draw people in, and that's probably the book you're going to advertise the most, it's definitely worth getting some outside opinions just on that. And here's a little tip. If you're kind of browsing around a new category, somebody was talking about, oh gosh, what is it? It's not lit RPG. We talked about that, and a lot of people are doing that right now. But this was something like reverse harem, it was called, in fantasy, where I guess the woman has 8 guys or something. I don't know. apparently it's a thing. And so I looked at some book that was selling real well because they linked to it, and it was like 2,000 overall on the Amazon store. And I looked at the blurb and I'm like, I can barely understand this. So there's a key. Go write a good book with a good blurb in this category if it interests you, because stuff that's not very good is selling. And that's actually kind of how I got into the sci-fi romance stuff 3 years ago. Is I saw, God, there's a lot of horrible covers that are in this top 100, and there's a lot of poorly edited blurbs and look inside samples. So I thought, well, if you could write decently, maybe that's the time to take advantage of this. It's changed a lot in the 3 years, which is to be expected. Once you find something, you expect everybody else is going to find it too. But like I said, some little new trend, you never know. If it's in your wheelhouse and you're reading about it, it could be a little thing you could take advantage of when you see poorly blurbed books doing well in there. All right, our next thing is the check is just, the basic editing, and are your sample pages, do they grab people? I feel like it's easy to try too hard with book hooks. They'll seem gimmicky if there's like the opening with a battle or something really grippy, but you just have to kind of raise a question, make somebody curious right off the book. Why is this person doing this odd thing? Or, it doesn't have to just... Some people are better at it than others, but don't try too hard. But at the same time, hand them to somebody. And if, we sci-fi and fantasy people are horrible about the info dumps, and none of us think we do it. And then you hand it to someone, they're like, do you know you have a huge info dump on page 3 that goes on for 8 paragraphs? You're like, no, that's important to the story. That's not an info dump. But gosh, you don't want that in the sample pages. Just as little as you can do. And I'm guilty too, especially if you're doing like a spin-off for series and you have all these characters that already know each other and have this history. You feel like you have to explain a little bit. But I'll kind of catch myself, and I'll try to edit it down into maybe just a sentence, like, oh, here's the person, the da-da-da-da. And just get into the story. You would be surprised at how little needs to be shared that way, and how much can just kind of gradually come out over the course of the story. People don't need the whole world, the whole religion explained right off the bat. All right, thoughts on that, Joe?
Yeah, this is another one where like I could light the chat on fire by pointing out this is a situation where a prologue can help you. If you have a sort of if you have a well-constructed thing which requires no prior knowledge but engages someone in the story before launching the plot, and that's in the preview, that's the sort of thing that can grab somebody. Now, naturally, just do that as chapter 1. That's fine too. But yeah, it's super important. I have not put a whole lot of thought into that people will be reading the sample necessarily, because you just, as a rule, want to grab people from page 1. But yeah, like get people early with like get them asking questions that they need to know the answers to, and they're going to want to continue reading.
Yeah, and I feel like in the ebook era, the sample pages are a bigger thing. Just beware too if you have any front matter, if you're thanking your dog and your parents and everything, just that's fine, but maybe put it at the end, because especially if you have a shorter book, there's not going to be very much of a sample, and a lot of people just go grab like 10 samples, and then whatever one is interesting is the one they end up buying. I never used to do that. I used to give books a lot more of a shot, and I don't anymore, because it used to be like you grab 10 books from the library and then you're not going to get any other books until you go back to the library. But it's so easy now. So just make sure those first pages, especially, I mean, hopefully the whole manuscript is clean, well edited, but you don't want a lot of editing errors in the first pages or boring content. I'm not a big fan of prologues, and we've kind of talked about why sometimes they don't work that well and that agents don't like them. But hey, most of us are self-publishing, so we don't have to worry about an agent or a publisher if they're going to go, oh gosh, prologue, skip. If you feel it belongs there, if you I've done a couple of them. I had one from the point of view of 2 guys moving a couch, because the couch got blown up by a dragon, and I just thought it was a hilarious way to start that particular book. So it's okay once in a while. All right, then something else to check. And this, again, hard to judge yourself, but the stories and the characters, are they engaging people? if you don't, if you've sold a reasonable number of books, maybe 1,000 books, and you're not getting emails from people that are like, oh, I loved the story, or when's the second one coming out? Please, I really need more. That can be a sign that maybe they're just okay. And to really get fans and have that rabid fan base, there needs to be something about your work that really people really enjoy. They love your characters, or they love the way you plot, or they love the cool fight scenes that you write. Depending on your audience, it can be different things that draws them in. I love to do the character stuff. I'm horrible at a lot of the other stuff, world building and making up religions and a lot of the sci-fi fantasy stuff. But that's kind of what people that read my stuff, that's what they enjoy, is kind of the humor and the character moments. And that's my thing. And whatever your thing is, just make sure you have a thing. And if you don't have people asking you for more, maybe it's time to try a different story, different characters, or get, it's, again, throw it in a critique group or something, get some outside opinions from people who are not related to you and have no reason to tell you it's great. And I feel like sometimes reviews are not that telling. When you get more, they are, but a lot of times for us, those first 20, 30 reviews are going to be coming from people that maybe they're not your friends necessarily, but they're like only 1 degree of separation or something because they got your book from, you, or they may not want to hurt your feelings. So I always feel when I look at books, when they're over like 100 reviews, that's when I feel like, okay, this is probably a good indication of things. But if it only has a few reviews, then five-star reviews is great, but if they're from people and sometimes people just will give 5 stars to anything. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that one, Joe?
Yeah, I definitely fan mail carries a lot more weight for me. And yeah, I mean the books that don't sell well, not surprisingly, don't get as much fan mail. But I've often found the opposite, where I've gotten a lot of people seeking me out on social media and sending me emails about the other 8 between, and I've gotten at least 1 email about Struck Tophus, the Pizza Dragon story. So like you can find out from a book with bad sales that's still worthwhile because people are really engaging with the characters. So yeah, definitely pay attention to what people are interested in.
All right. Next one on my list, I basically already talked about this, but just watch out for, like the info dumps or slow pacing can kind of kill you too. Again, if you have those sample pages and maybe it's only like 10 pages, depending on the size of your book, there's got to be something going on in there that grabs you right away. Just be careful of, if you get to the end of your first chapter and it's sort of like, okay, what happened in that chapter? And your answer is like, well, I introduced the plot and all the characters. And like, no, something needs to have happened. And that's what gets people wrapped up in the story. So cut it if all you did is introduce people. All right, so another one, Joe, you might want to talk to this one that I put down. Like, is your story just really niche, so your audience is going to be limited? And as Joe was saying, it's totally possible to write a quality story that just doesn't resonate with many people. A lot of literary fiction is like this. Also, if maybe you're doing romances that are like LGBT, there's an audience for sure, but I see people do like the lesbian stuff, and that seems to be like a really hard sell. It's like with the male stuff, you'll get women that will read that too, straight women. So some stuff, if it's really niche, it's not that it won't have an audience, but you're gonna have a hard time finding those people. They're gonna have a hard time finding you. There may not be a category on Amazon for it. That's kind of something you might have to accept if that's what you want to write, is that, okay, it's probably not going to become a huge blockbuster. And are you okay with that? You may do like some people will write one, I think Joe kind of does this, one for me, to just totally for creative fun, and one for, okay, I know this series sells.
Yeah, that's definitely been the case. Like I just listed 3 books. All 3 of those books were written more almost on a dare. And yeah, I set my expectations low. I typically spend less money on the production of those books. Like the covers, I'll spend less money on, and I won't skimp on the edit, but I won't push the launch as much as I might have, because that way I don't have to make as much for them to be worth my while. But yeah, certain things just aren't going to be uh, appealing to a huge audience cold. Like, it might appeal to your entire audience if you're lucky, but maybe not even then. Literary fiction is a good example. You don't just have to write a story about a pizza oven dragon to not necessarily get the interest of all of Amazon. Literary fiction is often very personal, and by definition, if something is very personal, it's very specific, and therefore maybe not broadly appealing to the audience. So you sort of have to accept that certain books are only going to sell a certain amount of titles.
I think it's hard when you, especially if it's an early book, you may not realize yet that your niche, like that's something you get a feel for kind of after a few launches don't go as you expected, or after maybe you read like the Right to Market books and things like that, you get more of a feel for whether that is you. And if it is, you do need to have lower expectations. I think low expectations are great to have because then you're just always pleasantly surprised. If a book actually does well, if you get in the habit where one time you launched one series and it sold really well, and since then nothing else is done as well, and you're frustrated because you're carrying the expectations from that one series and just trying to duplicate that, and why can't you duplicate it, then you're kind of setting yourself up for a lot of angst. So just, for most of us, the goal is like to make enough to hopefully make a living. A lot of people, not everybody has that goal, but a lot of us do, to, make enough to make it worthwhile, cover the edits and a little extra. So low expectations are the secret to happiness.
There's nothing that makes you happier than exceeding your expectations, and that's easier when
There
they're
you
lower.
go. Kind of tying into this next one on here is just, are you a little too cross genre or trying to straddle genres? And it's, I think Chris Fox has talked about this before, where he thought he was hitting 3 different genres or something and it was going to be really popular, and it turns out you're not really kind of hitting any of the genres in the way that people expect a lot of the tropes for the genre. So it can be hard if you have an idea for a story and it happens to be cross genre, do it, have fun with it. But don't be surprised if it doesn't quite catch on the way, look, here's a paranormal romance with vampires. It's selling really well. So just another thing, and we talked about this just last week, but if you're doing that, I'd probably kind of make it look like whatever genre it most is. Try to try to make it look like that, and if it has other elements, great. But advertising it as cross genre, most people that are not authors are like, what the heck is cross genre? It's kind of a term that only we use. So, all right, coming to the end here. Have you simply not done enough to drive people to the book sales page? So, some people give up pretty early, and it can be hard to, because in the beginning you're trying to get reviews because some of the sites require you have 10 reviews, or it's tough to get the ball rolling. And that's why, like, when I did my pen name, I started right off making one perma-free for a few months, because I had 2 other ones that I wanted people to buy. I just accepted that it's hard to get started. So if you can do something like that, like make one free or a prequel free or something that you can give away as a teaser, it can help. And you don't have to have the plan to start out that way, but if things don't go as well as you were expecting, maybe that's something you can do. And some people do have the cool cover art. They do have the blurb. They are right on what the market wants, and they launch out of the bat with a bestseller. It does happen, but it's probably more common to you need to try a lot of things and write a few books before you have that kind of luck. All right, any thoughts on that, Joe?
I'm terribly guilty of this. Like, despite this being a marketing show, I learn far more than I teach, I feel. And 100% of the time, if a book is not performing to my expectation, it's because I didn't put the effort into preparing for the launch and building momentum, doing all the things that you're obviously supposed to do. So yeah, like, always, sort of, all things being equal, trying to get your book in front of more people is going to get more people to buy it. And definitely just sort of look at what your promotional techniques were and if you can improve them.
All right, last thing on the list to consider is pricing. A lot of newer authors will come into this thinking, there's no way I would ever give my book away for free, or there's no way I would do 99 cents. And, it can work, especially with Kindle Unlimited, because your book is essentially free for anyone who subscribes. So you are, just so you know, you are giving your book away free for $10 a month. But you know, especially if you're wide and you're not in KU, you may need to do some things like a free run or a 99-cent run. Eventually, don't start out necessarily with it free unless you have a plan. Like I said, I had books 2 and 3 at full price ready to go when I made that one free. But it can be something to consider down the road if you're just things are lagging along, you know, set up a free run. You don't have to make it free permanently. You can do a week free, run some promos, see if that, if nothing else, that may get you some reviews, especially if you ask at the end of the book, please review the book. I'm a new author. It will help me get the word out, that kind of thing. But pricing in general, we're seeing right now, you know, I think on Smashwords, Mark Coker does a survey every year and kind of says what price points are the most popular ones in the genres. And it just seems like around $3.99 is kind of a pretty solid price point for a full-length indie novel. I'll do $5 if it's over 100,000 words. I haven't been writing that long lately. I've been more in the 80, 90,000 word range. Just because it's a little more efficient. Like you can't charge a whole lot more just because a book is 200,000 words. So that's something always to keep in mind. $2.99 can be okay, especially for a newer book. $1.99, don't do that. That's a horrible price, and nobody buys it at $1.99, and you don't get the 70%. $99 can have its use. Again, you know, usually $99, I'm doing it as a book one with a whole bunch of more books to buy. Just a easy way to get people in there. Whether it's in KU or not, you're still going to get people who will buy instead of borrowing. So that can be useful for a book one. Free can eventually be useful for a book one. Just, I know a lot of people are like, well, trad publishing, they do $7.99, $9.99, $14.99, but they have a big marketing arm behind it. Usually, a lot of times, we talked about this last week, that sometimes they do that with new releases and those people flop because nobody's going to try a new author at that price. So, but I will say nothing's set in stone. You can always experiment. You do not have to do what I do or what Joe does. You don't have to do our pricing. I think we're both kind of on the lower end. I certainly know indie authors that do $5, $6. There's at least one person that does $9.99 and has a fan base willing to pay for it. So you can play around with it, but that's something to check if you're not selling. Hey, maybe just running a sale can kind of get the gears rolling a little bit. All right.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Yeah, just there exists a sales curve. It's like when Mark does the price thing, and there's actually a thing when you publish on KDP where they'll sort of recommend a pricing to you, and it comes to where, you know, at the low end of it, you're going to be selling more books and therefore making most of your money from the volume, and on the high end of it, you'll be making most of your money because you make more money per sale. And you got to keep in mind that even though it might end up leveling off, and you'll sell twice as many books of something that costs half as much, and therefore make the same if you had been selling it for twice as much. When you're selling twice as many books at half as much and making the same amount, you're also putting more books out there, which gives you more opportunities for sell-through, or at the very least, more word of mouth. So just remember that a lower price book, all things being equal, has a greater capacity to spread your fame and raise your rank and all that.
Right, and that's why I often do it for book ones, is that I just want as many people as possible trying the book, and because it's not going to be for everybody, but the more people who try it, the more people are going to get into the funnel and read the rest of the series. And I'll actually raise prices on older books that are selling that I haven't promoted forever, and I'm not doing any new books in the series, so maybe they're only selling a couple copies a day, and because the people who are buying it are going to be fans of something else of mine, and that's why they're coming over to check it out, and they're probably willing to do the $5 price tag rather than just bargain basement shopping. So something to play with. I guess that wraps us up. I don't know if we have any more questions. We're at an hour and 20 minutes, so we should probably
have a few more questions, but I think we should probably wrap it up.
Wrap it up. And we do actually have a guest for you next week. Hey, we have a guest / listener / Twitter buddy. Dale's coming on, and he's a librarian for his day job. So we'll see if we can get any tips. I know we're always kind of trying to figure out how to get into the libraries a little more efficiently. And I think we're going to talk urban fantasy too, because that's what he does. So join us next week. I think it's the 17th. Yay. And it's the usual time, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, if you want to come on YouTube and we'll try to get to your questions. Jeff should be back. He's usually our
Yes,
chat
Jeff's better
room
on chat.
watcher. He's good at that. So thanks everyone for listening tonight. Hopefully we weren't too boring. We're the two quiet introverts that avoid eye contact. So, all right, take care, everyone.
So long, everybody.